Hi there everyone, Dustin Cassidy here. I just wanted to take a moment in this video to talk about this thing today. What is this? It is a Korg Electribe, and I got it last year when it came out, and I've just had a ton of fun with it. It's really cool, and I want to get into a little more detail about on how this thing works. Well, what is it in the first place? It could be classified as a groove box. Well, what is a groove box? Groove boxes came out in the 80s with things like the MC303 by Roland, and I think that was the first groove box to actually use the term groove box. And they originally started as devices to help people, musicians who maybe were missing a drummer or bass player, to help them accompany themselves. And then they grew into more detailed, deeper devices that became favored by a lot of electronic music producers and DJs. And this, a lot of different manufacturers have made these kinds of groove boxes over the years. And the Korg Electribe series came out in the late 90s, and they're into about their fourth generation now with this. Even though it's often, this particular one is often called the Electribe 2, if you Google it that way. But really it's about the fourth generation of these kinds of things. What is a groove box nowadays, or this one in particular? Essentially you've got a few basic elements that make up a groove box. You've got a drum machine and drum samples of certain kinds, and then you've got a sequencer, and then you've got some kind of sound making element like a synthesizer based sound engine or a sampler based sound engine of some kind. And this particular one is a synthesizer based sound engine, but it doesn't accept user uploaded samples. There's another one called the Electribe sample, which does just that, and it works a lot like the Akai MPC series, which are kind of groove boxes unto themselves. This one though, yeah, is synthesizer based, and it has a bunch of different drum sounds, and it's really cool to use. What is appealing about it is this hands-on interface gives the user the ability to do a lot of kind of improvised real-time control that is really fun, that might be difficult with a computer. You could use maybe a MIDI controller and get away with it this way, but there's just some certain immediacy to using hardware, and it changes your thinking with the workflow. Somehow it lends itself to a lot of creativity. I feel like a kid again when I use this, and that's a good thing when it comes to creativity. You just think differently, you have a fresh perspective on things, and I think that's why hardware like this, even though it is limited compared to what you could do on a computer, I think that's why it still has massive appeal to people even in this computer age. So let's get into it. I'm going to cut to a bird's eye view here, and we'll hear some sounds. And for more detailed sounds, if you're just writhing out of your chair right now, I want to hear how it sounds, you'll hear how it sounds in this video in just a second. But also I'll be putting out some more sound demos. You can Google around for other sound demos. There's a lot of them out there, but I would like to focus on some different kinds of sounds that this is capable of. This thing, in all its forms and generations, the Electribes and the other groove boxes, they often find themselves being used and abused almost exclusively for dance music. And they do it well. They do dance music very well. But it's unfortunate that seems to be the stereotype of these things. They get pigeonholed by people. And as soon as I started watching videos online of people using this thing before I picked this up, I got really excited. And I thought, okay, I'm not into this dance music stuff really, but I can just tell you could do something really different and really cool with these things. And I did find a few people doing something a little bit different with these. And that's what got me excited about this. I thought I could take this in a different direction. So that's what I'm going to try to focus on a little bit. I'll talk about the typical stuff, and then we'll get into how you could use this in a less typical sense. And then I've also got some interesting maybe workarounds that help get around some of the shortcomings, and some other interesting features as well. So let's take a look. Okay, and I'd like to give you a quick overview of the Electribe here. and what it's capable of, and talk about the different sections if we could. So the first thing I wanted to point out is the different main sections for creating sound. You've got your oscillator here, and you've got your filter section here, modulation, amp envelope, and insert effects section. So these are the main kind of sound creation and modification sections. Down here you've got your sort of modes of operation for the sequencer and these pads, if you will. So these pads can be used in different ways, and you change the way the pads can be used by selecting these buttons down here. We got party race, trigger, sequencer, keyboard, chord, step jump, pattern set, and all this stuff. Over here you've got some buttons that control how this XY touchpad functions. You can use the touchpad to control master effects. You can hold the master effects here. You can do like a touch scale where you kind of like burn up and down scales just by sliding your finger around. You can do an arpeggiator type thing with this as well, and we can demonstrate that in detail later. Let's start by first of all, you want to select with the main jog wheel here a pattern. So we're on this pattern here, it's blank, and then maybe we want to select a part. We have 16 tracks for our sequencer, so we go to trigger and we can choose, okay, so this is, you could think of it as track 1. Okay, we're on track 1. Now we want to choose what kind of sound. It could be any kind of sound playing from here, and that's when we go to this section right here. The oscillator can really be thought of as a, let's say, sound selector area. Okay, so we choose the sound we want with this. So we have this kick sound. What if we do this? Okay, we've got a different kick sound. We have all these different kick sounds and everything. Let's say we went further. We've got, what's next? We've got snares. Then we've got claps, hi-hats, cymbals, all kinds of percussion. And then we get into sort of sample hit type things, effects, some fun stuff here. Then we get into synthesizer type sounds. We have all kinds of different waves here. We have a section here at the end. These are sort of instrument samples. Sorry. And so on. So those are that's a really quick overview of the sort of the general sounds that are available on any given track of the sequencer. Next up, we have the filter section. The filter is, I think, probably one of the best features of the Electribe. It's fantastic. We have 3 modes: low pass, high pass, and band pass here. And we have about 5 different types of filter models that we can work with as well. So if we press this here in low pass, we've got, first of all, we've got the, we can have it off. We can have the Electribe one, which is kind of smooth. We'll get into that in a second here. MS-20 modeling. This is sort of a Moog type model. P5, not quite sure, sounds a little different. This is an Oberheim type filter. And then an acid kind of 303 type filter at the end. And you can use any of those filter models, like I said, with any of the 3 modes, which is really cool. Then we have modulation routing here. If we twist this, we have amp envelope, or the envelope generator controlling the pitch, amp envelope controlling the oscillator, and so on. There's just basically 2 combos. You have something dash something else. And then, you know, there's all kinds of different modulation routings to choose from here. And then you can choose the depth of it and the speed of the response, or the wavering of it here. And then we've got the amp envelope for the synthesizer type sounds. We can control the attack here, decay here, pan, and the overall just volume of that selected track. And then we have the insert effects here real quick. And first up we got punch. If we hit this button here, this turns on the insert effects, and we can select what kind and how much. This is sort of like a wet, dry knob. So those are sort of the main sections here. And we've talked about trigger. This is how you select what track you're on the in the sequencer. And then you can go to, let's say if we went to this here, we went to keyboard mode. Now it stays with this track selected, but we can turn the pads into a keyboard. Like that. And again, if we turn this on, we get the decay and release going on. And so that's keyboard mode, trigger mode. So this is basically, think of it as track select, if you will. This is sort of like keyboard, just turns this into a keyboard. Chord, I haven't messed with this too much. I think there's sort of a chord memory. So there's some other Korg products that have the chord function. That's kind of a tongue twister, like the Korg Poly 61, which I might do a little demo of in another video, that famously has like a chord memory setting. These functions here, you have to have something going on to kind of demo here. So let's go really quickly to just a stock you know, a thing that came with the Electribe here. So if I'm in step jump mode, it holds it treats this as like a 16 step sequencer, and you can sort of freeze it at different moments here. Pattern set, I haven't done this too much. I'm not sure what that does. We'll get into that later. Ah, I get it now. Yeah. So you can select your sort of your favorites of your patterns here. This is a quick way to switch your patterns. So that would lend itself really in a fun way to different kinds of improvisation there. Same with step jump. Let's go back to step jump. Right, you know, sequencer. You can turn on and off the steps in the sequencer in a way that's a little bit different than step jump. That's sort of like freeze. It just sort of freezes the sequencer. This is sort of like on off as far as notes in any given pattern. Trigger just sets up sort of an initial sound for each one of these. It's not too useful when improvising in real time unless you just want to select a different track to then go into keyboard mode on. You know, if you wanted to do that. Part erase, wouldn't really mess with that in an improvised way. Part mute, this is interesting. This turns the pads into a sequencer. So you hit this, and you can turn the different parts on and off, like that, till you get nothing. Turn them all back on. Hit this again, and it solos the buttons that you press. Just a different way to sort of turn each track of the sequencer on and off. So that is a little bit of the function buttons at the bottom and a real quick overview of these sound creation and modulation things at the top. So I hope that sort of starts to get your head around what this thing is. And in the next video, I'd like to get into the screen and selecting different settings to help really set up a project. I'd like to create an actual track with you next time. So that was a quick preview, quick overview, and we'll actually create a track for the next video. So thank you very much for watching.